Hi, I'm Keith St. Clair. I teach political science here at Grand Rapids Community College in the Social Science Department. I'm happy to be here and be interviewing Bakari Sellers, who's our Diversity Lecture Series speaker here at GRCC. Welcome, Bakari.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's cold, but it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to your talk tonight for the Diversity Lecture Series. What do you intend to say about diversity?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. Diversity has to be intentional, and so I'm appreciative first of the invitation to be here. It shows that the institution is intentional and purpose-driven. But my goal is to talk about broad themes of how far we've come and where do we go from here. Hopefully, engaging the audience in some historical context and allowing them some food for thought as they leave the room on the progress that we still have yet to make in this country, and hopefully get some intriguing questions. People always like to play pundit, and so tonight will be their opportunity to spar, I guess, with a pundit.
You're a rising star in the Democratic Party.
That's what the bio says sometimes, I guess.
Being the youngest elected representative from the South Carolina State Legislature. And you served for a time, and now you've moved on to bigger things. Do you intend to talk tonight about your the political party, the Democratic Party, and its stance on diversity issues?
So, I mean, if asked, I think that's something we can delve into. Mine will be more of a 50,000-foot view speech, not necessarily narrowing that to a political party. I think that both parties, respectively, one more so than the other, have diversity issues or the lack of diversity issues. But throughout my experience, I served for nearly a decade in the General Assembly, my entire 20s, which sounds kind of weird to say. And I've been the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor, so I have some experiences. And now being on CNN and being able to do that work throughout politics, I've been able to see the intricacies of both parties, and I'd be friends with members of both parties. But tonight will be a little bit higher level and hopefully challenging to those individuals who are in the audience from both parties.
Yeah, the Democratic Party has seen some young people recently elected to Congress. Of course. And some of them have been in the news this last week. Ilhan Omar, representative from Minnesota, and her comments about, she had to apologize about a anti-Semitic trope that she used, referring to the moneyed wealth lobbying of members of Congress and implying that it was the Jews who have a lot of money to do so. She apologized for that comment. I know you have been a supporter of the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. What do you have to say about her comments and her apology?
Well, I mean, I've made my position pretty clear on both with Jim Sciutto this week and Chris Cuomo just last evening, and I don't have any hesitations about making that point clear again. I think that Congresswoman Omar's tweets were anti-Semitic and were ignorant in that she enveloped her criticism in anti-Semitic tropes. She made the conversation about Israel and Palestine, which is a nuanced conversation, much more difficult to have. I always tell individuals that I'm someone who's hypercritical of Bibi Netanyahu. And I think that criticism is fair. I think if you want to have an issue or take issue with the expansion of settlements, that criticism is fair, or the way that law enforcement treats Ethiopian Jews in the country of Israel. I think that criticism is fair. But when you delve into anti-Semitic tropes, I think that's beyond the pale, and I think that type of dialogue has no place in our discourse. And it makes those of us who are attempting to actually become educated and be able to go out and elaborate on these issues of Middle Eastern peace, it makes our task that much more difficult. And so, I find her comments to be ignorant. I find them to be anti-Semitic, and I find them to be disappointing. I will say, however, though, that the blowback that she's getting is rightful. I just wish that the blowback was equal in proportion when you have the racism of Steve King from Iowa, or you have Kevin McCarthy, who literally said that Soros and Bloomberg were trying to buy the election, which is a very similar trope to Congresswoman Omar. Or you have the President of the United States, who had Hillary Clinton in a bed of money with the Star of David, falling into a very similar anti-Semitic trope. And I think that there are many Republicans in this country who can sit this argument out. It's okay, because you do not have the moral high ground when we're having these discussions. So I think that to summarize, you can be critical of Israel, and you can be critical of the peace process without necessarily, or what semblance of a peace process we have, without being anti-Semitic. I think you have to. It's incumbent upon us. The rest of it is just purely disgusting. I think that she should have apologized, and she did. And I think that we have to continue to educate people, especially new Congress people and everyone about those issues. But I also think that we have to be even-handed in our disdain and distaste, because I think that both parties suffer from that scourge.
Yeah, and some other young congresswomen, Congresswoman Tlaib in Michigan, who's in trouble for using swear words, talking about impeaching the president.
I think that's apples and kangaroos. Sometimes, what you're talking about, the president of the United States, who was on an Access Hollywood tape saying he's going to grab women by their private parts. So, saying that you're going to impeach the MFer is what is that, locker room talk? I don't know. I think that those two things are nowhere near equivalent. And sometimes we find ourselves in whataboutisms. I just find those two things to be, one is disgusting anti-Semitic rhetoric. The other one is, so what? She said what she said.
Well, my point in bringing it up is that, these are young congressmen, you, a young legislator yourself, up and a rising star in the Democratic Party. Do you think that these young Democratic leaders need to be more careful in how they speak? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, would you have any advice for them in how they should proceed as
you say what you want to say. We have a First Amendment for a reason. I think that what they're learning, though, is that your actions don't come without consequence. So whatever you say, you're in Washington, D.C. now. You're not in Minnesota. You're not in your district in New York. You have to go out and face the scrutiny. You have to face the media. You have to answer those questions. And so individuals will tread lightly. But I'm not certain that people are asking, what is this old 70-year-old man going to do about his tweets and the fact that he's, one of the more condescending, bullying figures we've had in public office. I'm not hearing the same when is a very old individual like Steve King, who's been racist and still is racist today, going to change his behavior. And so I just think that each individual we can't look at in a vacuum. I don't think they're all lumped in together. But I think that the Democratic Party has elected a wide array of individuals in this past November that's healthy. And the conversations that we're having hopefully be ones that we can learn from, but continue to grow this country together.
So would you say there's a double standard then for female politicians?
I think I don't think that this is an example of that double standard per se. I think that Congresswoman Omar has been rightly rebuked by the leadership of the party, and many people who aren't leadership of the party like myself. I think that you see a double standard when you have 4 women like Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren run for office, and the way they're treated, yeah, for sure. I don't think that highlighting the freshman congressional women, though, shows that double standard per se.
Okay. Well, it seems to be important. Women are a real force in the Democratic Party right now, and the record number in Congress.
Yeah.
You have what looks to me like a record number of women running for president of the United States with the intention of unseating Donald Trump. Do you think the fact that they're women is going to hold them back in the presidential contest in 2020?
Not at all. I don't necessarily understand that question. I think that women have been the backbone of this country for a very long period of time, the backbone of the Democratic Party, particularly African-American women. I think Amy Klobuchar is an amazing candidate. I think Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand are amazing candidates. I think Donald Trump on the stage with Kamala Harris is a fascinating and intriguing matchup, because Donald Trump can't stand on the stage with her. And I think beyond them, the Sherrod Browns and the Joe Bidens, and the list goes on and on and on, the Beto O'Rourke's. I just think that that's a wealth of talent. We do have to be mindful of the way that women are caricatured and the scrutiny of them. For example, Amy Klobuchar is mean to her staff. I'm not sure how many stories we see written about men like that, or Kamala Harris and who she's dated in the past has never been a story, or the fact she has a white husband. No one is asking those questions of who else, what other men are dating who, or who they slept with in the past, and those things. So you start to see those standards emerge, and we just have to be cognizant of that and make sure we push back against those.
Okay, so immigration. It promises to be one that President Trump is going to continue to beat the drum on going into 2020. How do you think the Democrats should approach the policy of immigration? Do you think that they're striking the right tone versus the president?
I think they're striking a tone that's the antithesis to the President of the United States. I think that the President of the United States, his tone is built in xenophobia, right? From the time he rolled down the steps and saying that Mexico was sending us the worst of them, their rapists, etc. The fact that we live and bathe in these lies that emanate from the White House, the best example of which is that if we build a wall, all of a sudden drugs will stop and crime will stop. But we all know that the number one purveyor, the number one way that drugs come into this country is through legal ports of entry. We also know that the largest impetus for addictive medications in this country are the pharmaceutical industry. And we just watched the trial of El Chapo, and where he was just found guilty recently. And throughout that 11-week trial, we found out that he either used legal points of entries or tunnels. It was stated multiple times that a wall would not have stopped his multi-billion-dollar drug industry and drug trade. And so I think the Democrats, when one of the things they proposed recently in this debate over the wall is something that's sound, which is, they're giving the president $1.375 billion in wall money, which will build 55 miles of wall compared to the 1,000 that he wants. But even more importantly, you're talking about reforming our asylum program for those individuals who are asylum seekers who are leaving oppression, violence from their home countries, and making sure we streamline that process and making sure people have adequate representation, adequate hearings, and can have a free flow in that system. Making sure that we have technology and an immigration border and barrier that actually looks like a 21st century immigration system, making sure you're paying your Border Patrol agents more and providing for more Border Patrol agents. So I think that you have a comprehensive plan. I think if we were to just go down to Mexico right now and build a wall, that idea is about as stupid as it sounds. And so I think that you have to have a comprehensive plan. And those individuals who think that somehow Mexican Americans or Mexicans, period, illegal immigrants are coming over here and just taking their jobs, that's just simply not the case either. It's hard to fight these battles, and Democrats have to do a better job of messaging and coming up with a clear message. But I think that I'm not sure everyone is going to believe the president in 2020 when he says, we're going to build the rest of the wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And so hopefully that those promises, which he fell short on, will resonate with the American public.
So do you think that the Democrats can go toe-to-toe with the president on the issue of immigration if he keeps that the playing field, or do you think that the Democrats need to pivot to other issues, and what issues would you select?
What we've realized is that the number one issue for voters in 2018 was not immigration. It was actually health care. And I think that a lot of individuals are appreciative of the Affordable Care Act. But a majority of Americans are appreciative of the Affordable Care Act. I think Democrats have to do things to repair and make sure that you strengthen the markets, make sure that you do things necessary to make sure you keep premiums at a low cost. But people appreciate actually being able to go and get affordable insurance that covers pre-existing health conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the number one driving force. But we also see fundamental inequality, economic inequalities we have. And the expansion of the middle class is going to be something that people care about, especially in states like Michigan, making sure that individuals who are hurt by the president's tariffs, which this is a state which is hurt by the president's tariffs, there's somebody who's a forward-thinking visionary who says, well, let's include more people in this American dream, which is expanding the middle class. I think so. The economy and I think healthcare will probably be larger issues and more looming issues in the election than will immigration.
President Trump seems to represent a fundamental change in how politics has been practiced and what seems to be working. His presidency seems to reflect a divide in the United States. The Trump supporters and those who are anti-Trump seem to be talking past each other, not even facing the same reality. Do you think Do you think that this is a permanent condition, or do you think this is just an anomaly that the passing of Donald Trump's presidency will return us to more normal politics, or is there a new normal?
Well, I hope Donald Trump's not the new normal. I think that what you've seen is a reckoning that this country has had to have. I think Donald Trump is the president we deserve. Now, let's contextualize this for one moment. Hillary Clinton got the third most votes of anybody who's ever run for president of the United States, period. Number one was Barack Obama. Number two was Barack Obama. Number three was Hillary Clinton. So let's understand that there is a 35% of this country that supports Donald Trump wholeheartedly, without any preconditions, preconceived notions.
It's an amazing amount. I mean, the support seems constant. I mean,
it's constant. It's almost.
It doesn't seem to waver.
It doesn't waver regardless, right? And it doesn't matter what you say happens or what he does. And I think that is a. So you have two theories. One is a theory that Joe Biden makes, which is that this 35% of people consist of those who suffer from some sort of economic anxiety, where they are watching, and Bernie Sanders speaks to that same tone, where they are watching the country grow and the 21st century pass them by, where middle America is watching their coal industry, their nuclear industry, the manufacturing industry, all of those things that their grandparents did, their parents did, they do, et cetera, pass them by. And you get these red herrings where you will have someone make an argument that in Indiana, Democrats don't care about your manufacturing jobs. They more care about transgendered bathrooms, right? And so you get these cultural arguments that are masked as economic arguments. I disagree with that. I disagree not only with the red herring, but I disagree with that theory, because I think a large swath of that 35%, not all by any stretch, but a large swath, it's more so of a combination of cultural anxiety and economic anxiety. There is some difficulty with the reckoning of a browning country, a country that's becoming more diverse, a country that by 2040, 2050 is going to be a majority brown country by all accounts. And there are certain tones and tenors that Donald Trump strikes that provide some comfort to those who feel as if they're being bypassed or replaced. And so I think you have a mixture of a cultural anxiety and economic anxiety, which proves to be that 35%. But let me be extremely clear. All Trump voters are not racist, right? You kind of have to throw, unfortunately, in this time, you have to throw that caveat out. But I will say that if you support Trump, you have to be okay with the president of the United States or the person that you voted for trafficking in racism at his convenience. And I think that that's a dangerous position.
So this identity politics, is this going to continue to divide America, or do you think this bridgeable?
Whose identity politics?
Well, I mean, it does seem that Donald Trump gets a lot of political traction out of it. I mean,
I'm glad to hear you say that, because most people like to attempt to say that Democrats are playing identity politics when I actually think it's a currency trafficked in by both. I think that I don't necessarily have a problem with it. In fact, I think it's healthy. I mean, I think as a Democrat, for example, for me, one of my largest issues is criminal justice reform, right? And for some of my white college-educated female friends, their number one issue is women's health care and reproductive rights. And then I have a couple of friends who are dreamers, and their issue is immigration reform and ensuring that they have a pathway to citizenship. I think all of that's healthy. And I think that you have to have specific agendas. I think you have to have agendas that are sound. I think that if you're going to be a Democratic nominee for president of the United States, you have to have an agenda which talks about historically black colleges and universities, talks about criminal justice reform, talks about legalizing marijuana, talks about strengthening the middle class so that all people can participate in that middle class, and actually talks about strengthening small businesses and making sure the SBA works for people of color. I mean, I think you have to be willing to do that. It's not a rising tide lifts all boats platform message. And I think it's okay if you're being thoughtful and compassionate in talking about these groups. I think where identity politics goes awry is when you're being a bigoted xenophobe, and you are talking and pitting groups against each other. And I think that there's certain battles, when Donald Trump goes to Alabama, he goes to Alabama and says that NFL players are sons of bitches, all right? That is purposeful. That's not a dog whistle, that's a bullhorn. 90% of NFL players are, not 90, but it's a very large percentage of NFL players are African-American males. And I think that those type of culture wars, Donald Trump wins. And he likes to fight those culture wars. I mean, what has helped the country from the battle between Donald Trump and NFL? Absolutely nothing, right? But it consumed us for 2-3 weeks, and he was able to tick that off and win something. So I think we have to be very mindful of giving him that benefit.
And feeding in an intentional distraction.
Correct.
On his part.
Correct.
So you say that what motivates you is really criminal justice reform.
Well, I mean, that's one of my issues. I mean, I think that I come from my agenda is what I like to call a freedom agenda, right? Some people call it a democracy agenda. I call it a freedom agenda. But I want to make sure that people have access to the ballot, a free and clear access to the ballot box. I hate voter ID. I think it's decently oppressive. I hate the fact that people attempt to, I think what Mitch McConnell said is the slap in the face to many of those people, my father included, who fight for the right for us to have the ballot box, when in H.R. 1 we were trying to get Election Day as a national holiday, which it should be. He said that was a Democratic power grab. I say, no, that's just what freedom looks like. And so making sure you have access to the ballot box. I think that you should have access to affordable housing and public transportation. I think that you should have access to clean water. I think that we have a criminal justice system that needs to be unraveled from the bottom up and not penalize people of color disproportionately. And so those are I think that I would love to have. I was walking through your campus and saw so many different types of people. And I want to make sure that all of those individuals have I always say I can't make you dance, but I can get you on the dance floor, at least a dance floor. So that's my agenda. It's a democracy or freedom agenda.
Who are your political heroes? I
love Nelson Mandela. I did a lot of, my dad was a big Nelson Mandela fan, and so I genuinely appreciate Nelson Mandela. If we were talking about American presidents, and I'm sorry I'm breaking it down like that, if we're talking about American presidents, one of my favorite American presidents is FDR. I think that he probably had the most sustained, outside of Lincoln, of course, the most sustained political policy legacy of anyone. I think that Bill Clinton is the smartest president, the smartest person I've ever been around. I always say that Bill Clinton's the smartest person. Newt Gingrich is the second smartest person I've ever been around. I like to consider myself a friend, a distant friend of the 44th president of the United States, so he's probably third. But I am a child of the civil rights movement, and so politically, I look at Shirley Chisholm, I look at Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker, I look at Marion Barry, Julian Bond, as some of my heroes as well.
Okay. Well, I think we're almost out of time, so I want to thank you for being present here today.
I'm a kid from a small town where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light, and we always know the value of saying thank you. So thank you for having me, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure.